Welcome back to the Sinner's Sonnets, written and read by Giles Mirth. Part 2. Lust and Greed. As the audience below quietly hums, darkness gives history an added sheen, and to fond remembrance King succumbs back to when his wife was alive and keen. A melancholy memory King must watch as the lights dimmed she had knelt at his feet, inclining her charming face to his crotch. In the darkness it was fairly discreet. He remembers the fumble with his zip, breathless seconds of kindred excitement, the look she gave, the way she bit her lip before her mouth fulfilled the indictment. If someone did see, they ignored the act. That's the British way, show reserve and tact. The orchestra began the next segment. The soprano made every word a chime, her beautiful lips pleased without relent, her movements and the music keeping time. In rhythm, her head bobbed without pause. The song ended, a brief silence followed. The audience erupted in applause. She had leant back and smiled as she swallowed. King drifts back from his thoughts of times that were. He looks at Grace in the chair at his side. There is something familiar about her, and back to his wife his imaginings slide. Loneliness is such a useful device if you use it in a manner precise. Grace watches the curtain fall through a haze. The audience departs with low murmur, all passing before her distorted gaze, led through the crowd, her resolve now firmer. Her and Lynn hail a cab and head back west. King collects Jack once he's finished his shift. Jane is leaving too and clad in her best. By their own free will, together they drift. It's time for my pieces to assemble, gathered together to play and be played, each perfect as the card they resemble, unknowingly joining my masquerade. I hope the performance is enthralling, because the outcome might be appalling. All gathered at King's house on Regent's Park, within decorated in shades of grey, but outside the night has grown very dark. The immense main room is almost cliché. Styled with a little modernist bias, white couches, round table in shallow snug, a grand piano on slightly raised dais, a fake fire glows over a Persian rug. At the far end, floating oak stairs descend, the polished planks set straight into the wall, with no handrail upon which to depend, and nothing to prevent against a fall. A temple to all that wealth can obtain, and an ideal setting for the profane. Jane arrived with a suitcase full of tricks, whips, collars, chains, cuffs, and assorted toys, plus a hidden camera into the mix, a selection to excite girls or boys. Few are left impervious to her charms. Thigh-high boots, a lace choker at her throat, manicured nails, fishnet gloves on her arms, black leather corset under her coat. Short-cropped black hair perfectly frames her face. Her breasts are full and expensively fake, complete with French knickers trimmed in lace. They hide no secrets, they're scarcely opaque. Jane really was her given name at birth, and Jane Doe amused her for all it's worth. They sip at champagne tinged with liqueur. The liquid shimmers, alcohol persuades. The initial awkwardness they endure, a sense of anticipation pervades. Lynn seats herself on the piano stool, placing fingers to keys and feet on pegs. There's ice to break, conversation to fuel, tucking her pleated skirt between her legs. She starts to play, fingers stroking the keys. Jane moves close to provide a distraction. Her lips quick to kiss, her hands swift to tease. A low laugh is Lynn's only reaction. The lovely melody never alters, though flushed, frowning, her play never falters. Then standing to her laptop, Lynn retreats, fingers tap and music engulfs the group. A few songs and the awkwardness depletes, a dance album set to play on a loop. King moves to a wall switch, turns down the light. Lynn and Grace dance like a couple. Jane waits impatient but suggests no slight. Jack stares in envy at movements supple. King slumps in a chair as if in defeat. Grace dashes to lay a kiss on his cheek. He holds her hips in a tender deceit. She darts back to Lynn. The song hits its peak. Music conveys people's sexual whims. Perhaps all they have in heaven are hymns. Jane takes Jack's arm and spirits him aside, pushing him firmly into a spare room. Her assumed posh accent sounds almost snide, appraising him like a dog she must groom. He's quickly stripped, but Jack isn't shaken, just slightly nervous when wholly undressed. But Jane ensures a blue pill is taken. He takes her small smile to mean she's impressed. 2 white napkins and a brass tray are fetched, one over the arm, one the erection. He carries the tray on fingers outstretched, arranged with a champagne drink selection. Back to the main room, to what the night holds, he walks calmly, covered by just white folds. Together they soon rejoin the others, all of whom have been steadily drinking. Such indulgence inhibition smothers, all lost in their pixelated thinking. With each sip their thoughts further confounded, aims and ambitions all become clouded, their many flaws and mistakes compounded, the lights are low and their minds are shrouded. The room is soon cluttered with champagne flutes, all are amused with Jack's modest attire, the talk twists towards more errant pursuits, and furtively they begin to conspire. Grace reveals she's never been all the way, into that new fact King's attentions stray. Jane removes Jack's covering with a flourish, joking that a barrel needs to be tapped. She reaches down, arousal to nourish. In her expert hands he finds himself wrapped. A glass is positioned, though the fit is tight. All eyes are drawn to her undulating wrist. She stands behind, making him look slight, then mouths open as the glass starts to mist. Jane suggests some motivations missing, giving Lynn and Grace an expectant look, a small pause, then they smile and start kissing, not that they needed too much of a hook. Well, Jack, isn't this a fun path to tread? So just enjoy where your envy has led. The seconds pass and Jack's knees become weak. In his constricted chest he feels his pulse. Into the glass fluid begins to leak as he feels his attended flesh convulse. He's been holding on just to show he could, but Jane breaks rhythm, a sudden hard pull. Knees tremble and he quivers where he stood. A few harsh breaths later the glass is full. Face expressionless, Grace seizes the glass. With hands on her cheeks, Lynn mouths, "Oh my God." Then Grace swallows the content, bold as brass. Lynn shrieks, King laughs, Jane offers her a nod. So strange what people call their God to see, but it's not him watching tonight, it's me. Grace collapses laughing to the wood floor, washing her mouth out with vintage champagne, a first taste of what the night has in store. Jane looks like a general on campaign. From her case of tricks she selects a whip tucked under her arm like she's on parade, and she surveys them all with fist on hip, army recruits who didn't make the grade. She also draws out a black sequined mask, fits it carefully, adjusting the strap, then sets about her anonymous task, striking the whip to her palm with a slap. Jane knows this night is nearly to the edge. She'll push it over, she's not one to hedge. Jane fixes on Grace a collar and chain, looping it neatly beneath her red heel, then takes out the slack, her intention plain. She hauls on the links, forcing Grace to kneel. Grace could resist, but the trial would be moot. Even had she wanted, she couldn't rise. Jane commands, voice low, that Grace licks her boot, and a little greater force she applies. Lost in the fiction, Grace licks the leather, her small back arched and her neck craning. She looks content there, knelt on her tether, and all without any prior training. Jane hands King the chain, his time to enjoy. Keen to take the lead, no need to be coy. The chain is crushed beneath the leather sole, but with slack Grace kneels up, obedient. She looks up at him in his suit like coal. You can all guess the next ingredient. Grace, on her knees, knows what's expected. Although she's young, she's not that naive. Her hands unzip his suit when directed. He, too, knows what he's about to receive. Grace's eyes squeeze shut as lips open wide. Into fine hair his fingers firmly mesh. Tilting her head, his free hand helps to guide, and her mouth is filled with warm, tasteless flesh. He smiles down as he's gently filleted, unaware of the trap I've created. To great credit, Grace embraces the role and moans like a pornography starlet as repeatedly she swallows him whole till her cheeks hurt and her face turns scarlet. But King looks up, his fun insufficient, his eyes fix on Jack, who is now quite drunk, with vision blurred and speech intermittent. Under alcohol his ego has shrunk. At King's request he comes forward mumbling. To that command he first seems defiant, but then he approaches and crawls stumbling, head down, thoughts blurred, suddenly compliant. Both now knelt, he takes them each by the hair. Like good little siblings he makes them share. King smiles down at Jack's humiliation, exulting in his power and excess, but lust offers no conciliation. He's a man who desires every success. He draws away, chain pulling Grace with him, leading her to a nearby low-backed chair. She's leant over it, small and childlike slim. The others only stand, sit, kneel, and stare. Polished leather shoes push bare feet apart. A possessive hand travels down her spine. I swear there's not one regret in King's heart, believing this night was of his design. He takes the time to enjoy this conquest, thinking his power is beyond contest. Grace feels him draw up the hem of her dress, then delicately move aside her thong, his hands on her skin in a gentle press, too numb to say that she thinks this is wrong. King leans in close to confirm her consent. She just nods with a powerless feeling, so King continues his willing descent while Grace stares up at the distant ceiling. Stood by her case, Jane mentions protection. King's response is nothing more than a sneer, slightly angered at this interjection, a tiny scratch in his perfect veneer. His damaged fantasy is quick to heal. The warmth of her flesh makes it almost real. King looks down to her hips, pale and slender, and the act is gentle, almost silent, easing inside, accepting she's tender. With her there's no desire to be violent. Grace forgets to act. Our starlet is gone. The realization leaves her frozen. He goes slow, his triumph to dwell upon, perhaps reflecting on the path chosen. For Grace it's a dull, unusual hurt. For King, perhaps the thrill of something pure, or sadness has rendered his conscience inert as he grasps at youth, though age has no cure. Soon, as full consummation of his lust, the performance ends with a final thrust. Jane moves close to King and speaks with a hiss, inquiring if he's finished with the child, but certain he's done nothing too remiss, I can confirm he actually smiled. He undoes the collar, hands quivering, pale-faced. Jack stays knelt on the floor and drools. Grace straightens slow, whole body shivering as around her ankles white fluid pools. Lynn leads Grace away, head hurting, mouth sour, upstairs to wash without more discussion, trying to scrub away the past hour. King follows Jane with no repercussion. She asks if it's time for more adult fun. King may be satisfied, but he's not done. King's bedroom is large and richly furnished, centered round a four-poster bed of oak with wall-mounted lights, golden and burnished. The whole effect is of modern Baroque. To the bedpost each hand and foot is bound, his head covered with a black velvet bag. From it emanates a low moaning sound, he's naked save for the hood and a gag. Mixed pleasure and pain make his body writhe, and despite the moans, Jane works with finesse, the motion smooth, her arm supple and lithe, whip darting down into every recess. Gurgling as her free hand crushes his neck, with body trembling and his mind a wreck. Lynn offers her bed for a reunion, sleeps in a spare room so not to disrupt. Jack looks like a man taking communion as he kneels on the bed with his hands cupped. The light comes dimly from a single lamp. Grace comes from the shower feeling washed clean, a towel wrapped around her with hair still damp. Jack wants to rewrite events that demean. His hands move tentative beneath the towel. The scent of soap and skin comes in a waft. The concentration causes him to scowl as he marvels that skin could be so soft. Both flounder in morality's embers, groping for answers that neither remembers. Jane does everything King had hoped she would, her copper skin slick with a scented cream. To his great pleasure, she rips off the hood as the lights make her naked body gleam. Jane softly tells him that he should relax. Into her nearby bag her fingers dip, emerging soon with a lighter and wax, applied hot and red to King by the drip. Still seated on the bed beside King's knees, she places a condom between her teeth, and lowering her head as though to please, she smoothly coats him in a latex sheath. Jane ensures King receives what's been paid for, but soon he's going to get so much more. In Jack, emotion and alcohol swirl. He says to pretend that he is her first, as over Grace's hands his fingers curl, eyes pleading with some awful inner thirst. Grace rests with passive head on the pillow, eyes dry, mind wandering, breathing shallow. Her hair lies lank like leaves of a willow. She watches Jack with expression sallow. Her damp naked skin, gleaming white as milk and intimately accented in red, is to him softer than the finest silk, as again her legs are silently spread. I feel almost guilt causing so much blight, but any mercy now fordoes me quite. King and Jane are both most energetic, and though it's tinged with slight desperation, the sex is undoubtedly frenetic, all defined by sweat and exhalation. Lastly, Jane uses her favourite tool, a leather length affixed with steel buckle, appendage affixed. She looks at her fool, repositioning him with a chuckle. By his straining jaw the ball gag is ground, red eyes roll and drawn cheeks run with spittle, as against his helpless form her hips pound, an experience sure to belittle. Does James King enjoy this activity? Who can tell, though, with such proclivity? Jack's head is buried in feminine musk, with an inquisitive tongue exploring. Grace floats silent above her body's husk, dulling emotion that should be pouring. They shift. Jack lies back with a dead-eyed grin. She straddles his waist with a hand, fumbles, ineptly trying to bring him within some vague suggestion. He warmly rumbles. Then it happens, almost without warning. He guides her slim hips in slow rhythmic grinds. They make love numbly in the dim morning, seeking connection and out of their minds. After, exhausted, both in far too deep, they fall quickly into a restless sleep. Jane leaves first and before even sunrise, but her payment only sets greed stirring, so she carries away this night's surprise, the extra charge all will be incurring. Sunday morning brings bleak recollection and the scant memory of any laughter, all looking for a speedy ejection. It's definitely the morning after. Back to their little lives, but all is changed. Jack and Grace staggering like refugees away from this gathering I've arranged, as memory lingers like a disease. Don't worry, you can rely on denial. It helps you keep walking down life's dark aisle. Now King believes he paid Jane's fee up front, but for her the mere cash does not suffice. She thinks it too low if we're being blunt, so she intends to claim a higher price. Jane has a contact in the police force. He's prominent in the forensic team. Though this scientist is vile and coarse, she lets him use her skills to blow off steam. In exchange, he grants her certain requests where there's DNA that she has procured. As a favour, she has him run some tests, and here there is much that has been obscured. After all, is not the point of the game to reveal your cards and the winnings claim? So here we are then. I've made my gamble, and on this hand there's no more need to bluff. What's gone before has been mere preamble. It should salve my rotten soul just enough. Time then for some deceptions to reveal. I'm patient as one walking on glass shards, but from you I've no more need to conceal. If you didn't guess, then here are my cards. Gorgeous Lynn, of course, is a perfect 10. Jack plays himself. Jane as queen takes her place. For king there's but one candidate, and then, nicely completing the hand, is my Grace. A neat little trick for a minor fiend, but there's more to this, as I'm sure you've gleaned. This hand I've assembled is called a straight. Were they all the same suit, it can't be beat. On horror's head, horrors accumulate. I hope you will appreciate this feat. For they are the same suit, family at least. I can't tell you fully what brought them here, or the numerous wheels of chance I've greased. I've been a most effective puppeteer. First there's Lynn, bound to King by lowly law. Worse, though, Jane is his blood daughter unknown, a one-night stand to haunt him to the core, and there's one final horror to be shown. Jack and Grace are Jane's children from long past, given up, adopted, come home at last. From this night we'll see what horror will wake, for evil surfaces like a blister. Yes, father with daughter, make no mistake, and an innocent brother with sister. Oh, there's one more thing about which I've lied, but so did Grace. It's difficult to gauge. She's 14, I felt it time to confide. The law's strict on sex with the underage. Forensic work done, and all of this Jane knows. She will give her contact much recompense, but nothing compared to King's future woes. It's on him that these horrors will condense. Indiscretion across generations, sure to shake a man to his foundations. Of much sorrow the architect is greed. There's a wide world with much you can acquire. It's desire going beyond simple need that grows quickly into a tangled briar. The hidden camera performed its function, capturing the events with clarity. Jane would release it without compunction, but better to force King to charity. A charity for victims of abuse, and Jane the sole beneficiary. To buy her silence he'll be quite profuse, or all goes to the judiciary. No aid from that aging divinity. A royal straight flush will beat a trinity. For Jane, this is a simple extortion. The price is a cold £1,000,000 sterling. Giving King's wealth, it's a modest portion, but he can see his neat world unfurling. There's nothing but for the wound to fester, pay or lose more than mere reputation. Prosecuted as a child molester, no right way out of this situation. King is left with his loss on which to brood, as by wrath and false pride his soul is gnawed, while everything he has ever pursued might be forever corroded and flawed. To him, Jane has become a monstrous leech, and resolution seems beyond his reach. King is left with a stomach full of bile, defeat leaves him nothing but ugly shame, and even with all his commercial guile, all he can do is attribute the blame. Soon he knows nothing but increasing rage, though his wrath has not yet manifested. Nothing's beyond its tendrils at this stage, and from him self-control will be wrested. No one is immune to this rising hate, Lynn, Jack, even Grace, all accountable, though the main culprit is beyond debate. For her his wrath is insurmountable. Through his mind, constant thoughts of vengeance slink, but will someone push him over the brink? End of part 2. Please join me for part 3.